Many of us remember a time when the Beenade was the ultimate weapon against the wall of flesh. In days long gone, it would annihilate the wall. But then came the nerfs. First, the base damage dropped by about 15%, then they no longer ignored iframes. New, powerful weapons came to compete with them, and the wall's HP got higher and higher on Master and Legendary mode, making the grind to get enough Beenades even longer. But just how effective is the Beenade now? How does it stack up against the competition, and is it a good idea to get them? I upset a few people when I vehemently disagreed with the wiki, claiming that Beenades were one of the best options against the wall of flesh, but the response was strong enough that I decided to double check. Was I missing something? I haven't used Beenades since I pulled them out against the legendary wall, felt they were underwhelming, and swapped back to my Phoenix Blaster. If you're not familiar, a Beenade is a consumable thrown weapon dropped by Queen Bee. It deals low damage, 12 by default, but explodes in a swarm of bees, which all also deal 12 damage. They linger for 10 seconds, but will disappear early if they bounce off 3 walls or touch water or lava. During that time, they'll home in on nearby enemies. The bees cannot deal critical hits. On expert mode, you can boost this effectiveness with a hive pack, which causes half the spawned bees to deal an additional 1 to 3 damage. All that information, of course, is useless for the question at hand. We need to know how fast it kills the wall of flesh and compare that to other weapons. I have a flat arena here that we're going to use for every test. We're going to test 2 different builds, one that uses both armor penetrating necklaces and one that uses neither. We'll be on master mode and using the hive pack. These results won't be completely translatable to a normal game and are by no means the best possible performance, but it'll give us an idea of the damage we're working with in an environment where most variables can be kept constant. Beenades give us a kill time of 43 seconds with the necklaces and 55 without. That is respectable, and Beenades are very easy to use. The top eye wasn't getting hit the entire time, so performance could be improved, but not by that much. As you'd expect, additional defense makes Beenades quite a bit worse, so the necklaces help out a lot. Let's compare that to the Hellwing Bow. If a player is just running away and vaguely shooting behind them, I saw 48 and 56 seconds. That's pretty similar to the Beenades. In fact, the Beenades were a bit faster with the necklaces, while the two were pretty much identical without them. But that's not giving the Hellwing Bow a fair shot. Beenades are easy to use. Dealing damage effectively requires minimal effort. The Hellwing Bow isn't best used by running away and vaguely shooting behind you. You want to stay somewhat close and angle your shots upward to hit multiple sections. If we do that, the Hellwing Bow gets 37 and 45 seconds, a fair bit faster than the Beenades. So, Beenades with a supporting build in an ideal setup where they can hit all the wall segments are better than the Hellwing Bow used ineffectively, but worse than one used effectively. Let's compare to the Phoenix Blaster. It kills the wall in 53 and 61 seconds, quite a bit slower than the Beenades. In terms of damage output, the Beenades unequivocally win here. The Quad Barrel sees a similar result to the Beenades with necklaces and the Phoenix Blaster without them. So, Beenades are, purely in terms of damage when they can hit all the wall segments, in the same ballpark as the post-Skeletron Ranger weapons. They're quite behind the Star Cannon, even just shooting one segment at a time, the Knight's Edge, and a bit worse than the Demon Scythe. But damage is not all that matters. Let's go over the advantages and disadvantages of Beenades compared to other weapons. Advantages first. They're pre-Skeletron. The damage is good, not the best, but competitive and even a bit better than some post-Skeletron options. They are by far the easiest ranged weapon to use on the wall because they require no aiming. You just hold down attack and walk away. You don't even need line of sight, which can make them quite safe to use as well. But that's really all I can say as far as positives. Let's look at the disadvantages. You have to use blocks for your wall of flesh arena. You can't use water walking on lava because bees get destroyed in lava, and you can't use platforms or planter boxes because the grenades will fall through. That, or you have to stay close enough to hit each grenade, which means the ease of use advantage is gone and you have to put yourself in a lot more danger. You gotta farm Queen Bee. A lot. On Expert, you're probably looking at 3 kills, 4 to be safe. On Master, 5 or 6. On Legendary, over a dozen. Queen Bee is an easy boss to summon, but the other options don't need you to do all that. On top of that, that's farming for 1 attempt. If you die or want to refight the Wall of Flesh, you gotta farm Queen Bee again. You can't reuse your Beenades. You're down at least 1 accessory slot if you want Beenades to be competitive with other options. You don't need a hive pack to use a Phoenix Blaster, Hellwing Bow, or Quad Barrel, and not having necklaces hurts Beenades a lot more than most other weapons. And lastly, they don't play well with terrain, and a lot of weapons don't. Those time to kill tests earlier, they used a perfectly flat arena with no obstacles. Most of the time in-game, you'll have blocks that are going to mess with your bees. The wall's eyes might be spaced further apart, making it much harder for the Beenades to actually hit all 3 segments, and if they're only hitting 1 or 2 segments, they're not going to be better than the other options. This is also why the Phoenix Blaster seemed to underperform in those tests. In a realistic situation, it tends to be more effective because the other weapons can't do as well due to obstacles, but the Phoenix Blaster remains pretty constant. If we take an average arena, which is just a roughly horizontal line of blocks that doesn't destroy obsidian houses, and use the double necklaces build with the strategy of just run away and shoot, which is what most players are probably doing, Beenades clock in at 1 minute flat on Master Mode, as does the Hellwing Bow. Phoenix Blaster gets 56 seconds, pretty much our original result because of the consistency I was talking about with suboptimal arenas, and the Quad Barrel gets a couple seconds over 1 minute. All of these weapons perform nearly identically in this situation, and this is with the Hive Pack and double necklaces. If we compare that to the best Wall of Flesh weapons, the Star Cannon gets 27 seconds, the Knight's Edge gets 32, and the Demon Scythe 42. That's about all there is to Beenades. Are they good? Yeah. Are they the best weapon against the Wall of Flesh? No, not even close, and that's what I said in the wiki video. I also mentioned the Bee's Knees in that video, and it's a lot worse than Beenades. In the ideal arena, it performed a tiny bit slower than the Phoenix Blaster with necklaces, and 50% slower than it without them, and that was with a Hive Pack. This isn't me saying don't use this weapon. There were very few times in that wiki video where I said not to use a weapon. I said not to use the Medusa Head, which I stand by, not to use the tactical shotgun on the Empress, which I stand by, and not to use the Mega Shark post-Golem and on the Pillars, which I stand by. Most of what I said was to not recommend the weapons in the guides. In my opinion, a guide, a walkthrough, it should tell a player how to get from point A to point B with as few bumps in the road as possible. Yeah, I don't think a new player should just use the meta pick, that's less fun, but if that player is going, hey, I feel like I need to look up a guide for this boss, that guide should damn well tell them their best options. And that is not the tactical shotgun against the Empress. The class setups, for instance. These are not setups. This is a menu. And menus are great if you know what the dish is and what's in it, but a new player doesn't. They're being given a menu with no descriptions. Here are the 18 entrees, 2 of them have won national awards, and 1 of them will give you food poisoning. You can ask around to the other customers, read reviews, look up online what the dish is, but it would be a lot simpler if the waiter just told you what was good. That's the philosophy I take with those guides. Regardless of what I think a player should or should not do, they're looking for an effective guide. That's what I would give them. I would never recommend someone in a guide to use the Muramasa against the wall. You could do it, but that's just not good advice. I'm not saying only recommend one weapon, but don't recommend every weapon. And if there are a lot of recommendations, provide some information. This one is the strongest. This one is the easiest to use. This one is the easiest to get. And when it comes to Beenades, I don't think I would recommend going out of your way for them. Yes, they can be effective, but so can a lot of other weapons that can be obtained in an easier way. You can use them, they are good, but we're a long way from 2015 when they were overpowered. If you've already got a stockpile from farming Queen Bee, go nuts. They're particularly effective when you can make sure that all the wall segments are being attacked by bees with a Hive Pack and Stinger Necklace. The best thing about them is that you don't need a line of sight to use them, you just throw them and run away. If you don't already have a ton of Beenades, just get a Phoenix Blaster, a Hellwing Bow, make a Knight's Edge, Demon Scythe. At least those weapons will actually be effective in hard mode.